Today it's time to think about my brakes on my 2016 Winnebago View right behind me here. Time to give them a once over. This entails removing the wheels, taking a look at the pads to see how thick they are, and changing out the brake fluid. Yes, the RV is about 9 years old now, and I got 70,000 miles on it. And yeah, this will be the first time I'm changing the brake fluid. What you say? Yeah. The manual says it changes every 2 years. My bad. I haven't gotten around to it, so I don't change the fluid all that often. But today, being 9 years old, I am going to check it. I bought a handy little brake fluid tester from Amazon, and I'll check the water content in it. Let's see how necessary it is. Brakes are a critical safety component of your vehicle, especially a heavy RV like this. And I've never had trouble with the view, even going down through Colorado and those mountains down there on the way to see my daughter. However, I do have some experience with brake fade. Yes, I used to have a 66 Chevy van. So back in the day, which was probably about 50 years ago, anyway, I drove up Mount Washington in New Hampshire. And coming on down, it's a 2-lane road and kind of winds around a little bit. Trouble with my van is it had 4 drum brakes, and the back drum brakes didn't really work. So I just had the front one, and they started to overheat. As I pressed down on the brake pedal, it got harder and harder and harder, and finally I was almost standing on them. So I needed to pull over and stop and let them cool off for 10 or 15 minutes, something like that, before continuing. Yeah, that's the closest time I've ever had the brake fade. These brakes are pretty good. But to put that in context, Mount Washington Road is over 11 degrees downhill, versus in the Rockies it's 7 or 8. Well, neglect is usually the number one cause. That's when the pads just wear out and the owner just keeps driving and driving. And worn out pads will slowly lose their ability to stop. Another thing, of course, is overheated brakes. Especially if you ride the brakes or going down a long downhill or towing something that doesn't have brakes. Yeah, if they get overheated, the pads will get glazed over, and then you kind of lose some of your stopping power. And of course, the other thing is just a mechanical failure where one of the components is leaking fluid or the master cylinder fails, whatever, but that's not really that common. Your usage may vary, but we don't tow anything, and when we go to Colorado, I have the 6-cylinder engine, and I downshift in the 4th gear, going about 70 miles an hour. Yeah, I just occasionally have to hit the brakes. Usually my wife will let me know when it's time to slow down. Yeah, just keep the RPMs under 4,000, 3,500, something like that. And the V6 has a lot of engine braking, so yeah, it works fine. I will say that this big heavy vehicle does take a little longer to come to a stop. It's not like a sports car, so we just need to allow a little more time and a little more space to safely stop. Before I actually get into changing the fluid, let me give you a couple little tips. First off, open up the hood, look at the brake fluid reservoir from time to time. It has little marks on it, one for minimum and one for maximum. Yep. Here's the min mark down here. So as long as your fluid is in between there, you're good to go. You don't need to add more fluid as long as it's above the minimum. Over time, the level will probably go down slightly as you're using your brakes as the fluid comes in. But yeah, don't be topping it off. I wouldn't recommend that. Some cars have a little squealer that makes a noise when the brakes get low. Not with the Sprinters. The Sprinters have a sensor, so you'll get a little light on your dash when your brake pads need to be replaced. So you can go by that. If your brakes are making a squealing noise, it's probably something else, dirt or vibration or something like that. But you can also take a look at the fluid in the reservoir. Yeah, it shouldn't be really dark brown. More of like a honey color seems to be okay. If it gets much darker than that, then it's time to replace it. Getting a brake fluid tester is a good way to check the moisture content in your fluid to know if it's still okay or not. Yeah, I got one. It was really cheap on Amazon, so it works okay. The most accurate way to know how much brake pad is left is actually taking a look at them. Yeah, you kind of have to take the wheel off and do that. So I took a look at mine, and yeah, I probably got another 50,000 miles to go on them. So they're still in good shape, even after 70,000 miles of mostly highway drive. When the brake pads and the Sprinter wears out, Probably have to change the rotors also. They get worn down and probably almost at the same rate as the pads do. Okay, it's time to replace the brake fluid. This is usually a two-person operation because you got to pump the brakes. But I got this little kit from Amazon, so I'm going to try that out and see how that works. Of course, you'll need an air compressor to do this. For new brake fluid, I got the actual Mercedes .4 Plus. The .4 is a standard regulation nomenclature. The .4 Plus is a Mercedes thing. Yeah, and it's also thinner at cold temperatures. The first thing to do is to suck out the old brake fluid from the reservoir. Oh, doesn't look too bad. It's a little bit dark. It's not clear, but so once you get all that sucked out, and fill it back up with fresh fluid right up to the top, because that will go down as you're bleeding the brakes. Next thing is to pull off the wheels, one at a time. By the way, if you have these aluminum wheels like I have, the jack that comes with it doesn't fit, but it should have this adapter included into it, so you have to put the adapter on and then put this on there. I started in the back dualies, and oh man, what a bear. Those stinking wheels are heavy. Anyway, I managed to get them off. In the rear, here's the little rubber bleeder cap that I have to take off. The little kit that I got, you have to use your air compressor. Just open the bleeder valve a little bit, and again, it sucks it out. It turns out, yeah, I just worked so-so because my compressor wasn't really very big. It's a little bit underpowered for that. Apparently it uses a lot of air to pull the vacuum. But anyway, I got the lines all sucked out. I'm an engineer. I like to test things. I got this tester for 13 bucks. It measures the moisture content of the brake fluid. All right, if the moisture is over 3%, then the fluid is bad and needs to be replaced. First thing, let's check some new fluid right out of the can. Okay, 0%, that's good. Next, I checked the fluid from the brake reservoir. I was quite surprised to see that it was still reading good at 1.4%. Yeah, good is under 2%. So it's a .4. Shows green. 1.4%. Good is under 2% according to the chart that came with the tester. I also checked the fluid from the rear brakes. And this came out of the brake lines, so yeah, looks a little bit darker here. They fleshed out. This was 2.3%, which indicates the fluid should be changed. This probably is not super accurate because it may have some of the fresh fluid mixed in with it. That one's a little more moisture in it. It's the fluid from the driver's side brake, so let's check that. Yeah, it says you should change it. The front brakes were kind of similar. They ran from like 2 to 2.5%, so I guess the fluid wasn't super bad after all. Well, in conclusions, I was very surprised to find out the fluid wasn't really in that bad shape after 9 years. So what does that mean? Well, yeah, if you do racing around a lot or ride the brakes, that kind of stuff, yeah, you're going to have to replace your fluid more often, and probably 2 years is good. But if you're easy on it, I don't use the brakes that much because we're just driving straight along the highway. So it's going to last quite a while. However, it's up to you depending on how you use it. The other thing I'll mention is that, yeah, those wheels are heavy, so I don't know if I'm going to do this again. I'm not getting too old for this stuff. So, yeah, it was a struggle, but I got her done. Based on the thickness of the pads I saw, probably go 100, 120,000 miles before replacing the pads and probably the rotors also. Anyway, good luck with yours. This is Grandpa Ron, and I'll see you on the road.